Recorded live on the turf at Mad Lab Training Studio in Eldersburg, Maryland. This is the Time to Win podcast with Alex and Dan. Now let's get this podcast started.
Hey, Dan, what time is it?
Oh, Alex, it's time to win, baby.
What, again?
It's time to win.
Like, it seems like it's always time to win.
It actually might be always time to win.
So I was thinking, like the money shot of the podcast for anybody that's listening is you want to hear your name mentioned, right? So I was thinking, rather than subjecting our listeners to the agony of hearing us talk for 45 minutes before we start dropping names, I thought I'd just pitch a couple of endorsements and kudos out there, right? So, What a Day Cafe, wow, they make great stuff, great Sammys, great coffee, and they always have the best attitude when you pull through the drive-thru. So What a Day Cafe, love those guys.
I love What a Day Cafe, actually.
I told you before we went live that I had been reading about Mark. I've been reading Mark Twight, and he always gets me agitated, right? And so I want to thank Mark Twight again, as always, for just providing the heat, the fuel, the rage, the anger that motivates me most days, right? And it's motivating me right now. So I'm going to try and calm that down a little bit for the podcast.
What's the book he wrote?
It's called Kiss and Kill.
Kiss and Kill, Mark
Kiss
Twight.
and Kill by Mark
I like
Twight.
that.
And,
I like that.
If you want to get wound up, read Kiss and Kill. But that's not what I brought to the podcast today. I got something different on my mind. Before I go there, though, is there anybody that you want to shout out to?
Oh, I do want to shout out.
Yeah.
I want to shout out to our client and good friend Adam at CNA Auto. He's the owner. Anything goes wrong with your car, I'm saying engine falls out, you find out that an extra wheel just went through your windshield, anything crazy, or just like some normal stuff, maybe a little transmission or brake issue, you go to my friends at CNA Auto, you say that Mad Lab sent you, maybe Dan specifically, and they're going to take care of you. They're going to take care of you in a great way. Miss Kelly's going to get everything set up for you. It's going to be excellent. I guarantee a great experience.
All right, CNA Auto, What a Day Cafe. Let's just leave it at that, and maybe if we drop other names in there,
I might drop another one later on.
Yeah,
Who knows?
Okay. And so so here's what I'm thinking about, Dan. Right, I'm just going to make a statement. I'm going to throw it out there, and I'm going to let you do what you want with it.
Is this what you texted me about?
It is. It is. Okay. So you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Fact. Performance-enhancing drugs are fundamentally good for sport and the human race. Run with it.
Performance-enhancing drugs. I guess I could. All right, so this is a large topic.
Okay, right?
For sure.
This is why I've been so excited all week.
All right, so you have a balance with performance-enhancing drugs between entertainment, right? Because obviously the bigger, faster an athlete moves, the more outstanding things they can do. Right. And then also, not only that, but then you're better athletes, the more that they can do their sport. So stay on the field, stay on the court, stay on the ice, stay in the ring. Then the more entertained you're going to be, right? You don't want to have the best player in X, Y, and Z league be out for a whole year and then have their career cut short. Bo Jackson was a big one, right? Okay. One of the best athletes I've ever seen. Then has a hip issue, out of the sport.
Right.
So that is always excellent. But then you do have a line with some performance enhancers that cause all sorts of problems, right? Mm-hmm. Some hormonal problems later in life, heart issues, stuff like that. And then you have people dropping off the earth when they're 40 years old and still should be in prime shape to do whatever else that they want to do with their life. So then you have entertainment, maybe at the expense at some line of people's lives. And then you also have people looking up to those individuals, right? Mm-hmm. I want to be like this athlete. Well, he's on $8,000 worth of supplements every month. So then it's
every week. Right?
Every week,
yeah.
So then it's so there's a big gray area if we talk about working in gray areas.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear you say that, Dan. I'm going to die on this hill, though. I think performance-enhancing drugs are awesome for so many different reasons. And you can tell by my incredible physique, I don't use them. Right? And that might be a question for later. But, I think about you said the entertainment angle. Right? Mm-hmm. And that's great. Entertainment is important. People want to be entertained, especially by sport. Okay. And one of my mentors said to me one time, sport is great because it's a moral equivalent to war, right? A moral alternative to war. Hey, that's pretty cool.
That's a great, well said, I'd say.
And so, in my opinion, Dan, if you can make sport better and more entertaining, people are going to be less inclined to go out and do stuff that they shouldn't be doing, right? They're going to be entertained. They're going to be captivated by the thrill of the competition.
That was the whole reason for the Romans' gladiatorial games, correct?
Bingo. Okay, right. So nothing new on this podcast, right? We're just rehashing stuff that people have known for years, for centuries, for millennia, that performance-enhancing drugs are fundamentally good for sport and fundamentally good for humans in general, right? For our civilization.
Yes, I think I think that's I do think I do think it's a large gray area because there is also I feel like we talked about the responsibility that you have to reach your potential, right?
Oh, okay.
One of the earlier podcasts. And I think one of those things would be, how can you enhance your potential in any way that you can figure out, right? Mm-hmm. So scientifically, people have dialed in, found supplements that you can't get enough of in everyday life, and then they break them down into some kind of gel cap or pill form or whatever it is. Right. You take it, and then you're much better off for it,
okay,
right? But then it becomes how much are you taking of whatever it is? People will abuse certain different things. And then it's also which ones have effects that, while they're good on the short term for sport right now, are they bad for the long term for society?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think we call those deleterious effects. There's an SAT word for the day.
Yeah, explain that. I've never even heard that.
Just negative, like deleterious, like deleting, right?
Okay.
They cancel.
Not like the
right?
DeLorean.
No.
All right.
The deleterian. Right? I don't know. Okay, so taking that angle then and working with it a little bit, I heard a story once that in the early days of sport, working out was considered unsportsmanlike. It gave the competitor an unfair advantage, right? And sport, I don't know, maybe around the late 1800s, when sport was beginning to emerge as something that people did professionally, it was thought that the best people in the sport were the people that were the most talented, and that sport was built on raw talent, right? And people loved to go see the most talented person in the world exercising their craft. Hey, they still do, right?
For sure.
But it was considered that a person that was going to the gym or lifting weights or somehow gaining an unfair advantage over the natural talent of other people, right? And I take exception to that.
So that's the first part of performance enhancing.
That's kind of where I'm going, yeah.
Which is now very much not only accepted, but if you're not doing it, it's now you're ostracized if you're not doing that.
Well,
because it's you're not trying to get better at your sport. You're not working hard.
I mean, my doctors have been telling me for years, you have to work out, right? And everything you read in all of the accepted literature says, yeah, exercise is good for you. It slows down the aging process, improves the quality of your life. It makes you more healthy. It doesn't give you an unfair advantage. It's considered mandatory, right? Okay, so, that performance-enhancing act, or drug, if you will, 150 years ago, of saying, I'm going to exercise to get better at my sport or at my craft, has moved the needle now to that unfair advantage has become basically just, not only accepted practice, but mandatory practice. You must work out. Even if you're not an athlete, you're supposed to work out. You're supposed to go to the gym, be active. And
so if we're taking this and putting a bunch of years onto it, so who knows how many, right? Mm-hmm. It could be in 10 years. I don't know. You're saying that at some point, we might even have not only people taking all sorts of performance enhancers, which they do anyway, because there are accepted supplements, right? There's a list for whatever major sport is. The NHL has a list, MLB has a list, NFL has a list. of things that are accepted, and then that they test for that. If you fail, then there's consequences, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying not only probably, if I can see into the future, which maybe I can, people are not only going to be taking more extreme versions of performance enhancers that may or may not be safe, who knows how it would work, where they're getting a ton more size and strength and power and be able to do stuff that exceeds the limit of what we can do now. But maybe even people start to get like actually physically enhanced by actually operations.
I was going to say go
Right?
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, you need to get your rocket legs on or whatever it is. I mean, that's extreme, but
So since I'm using SAT words today, I'll call that elective augmentation, right?
okay. Elective, I like that.
Yeah. And yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about as well. You kind of brought me into that a little sooner than I was ready, but yeah, I think that's one of the logical outcomes of that, of trying to continue to advance the sport or move the needle in human performance. And you know, the field of human performance isn't limited to just sport. I mean, you know, I spent nearly 40 years in the business, you know, the professional world, and the demand to always be better, right? It was relentless. It was intensely competitive. People would die trying to move the needle on like corporate performance and their own performance within the corporation.
This is very interesting because this kind of goes into a bunch of different things. This is like where I want to write on a whiteboard.
This is why I was so wound up about it earlier.
So I can see why this would wind you up. So what you're saying it's not only it's inevitable, right? It's definitely going to happen. Like we're going to have athletes that have augmented limbs and all sorts of probably even hearts and lungs and stuff to have like that will happen at some point because human beings never stop pushing the limit. And we're very into, I don't mean to say they're like, I'm not a human, but who knows? But we're very competitive.
Yeah.
We're very competitive with each other, especially. So inevitably with all of the things and how ambitious we are going to move towards that. We always seek the next form of entertainment on top of it.
Yeah.
So besides being competitive, we also always look for the next form of entertainment and always want to be entertained further. So I think the demand will outweigh anything else that anybody's thinking that would not happen.
Right. Well, like take Oscar Pistorius.
Who is Oscar Pistorius?
He was the South African sprinter that didn't have legs, right? He had those blades, the running blades.
Oh, I have heard this, yeah.
Right? And so the guy was phenomenal, right?
Phenomenal.
And because he was so good on the blades or the whatever you call them, the prosthetic device that he was using. I call them blades. He was so good on these things. He was better than the best humans, like fully natural humans, right? And because of that, it forced the IOAC to make some changes to the rules about what could para athletes do, and how could they compete against a natural field, right? And then so that was great. It was super entertaining. It moved the needle on human performance. It fed us with a great scandal because he shot his girlfriend. Remember all that? He went to jail, and I mean it was all the stuff that everybody just drools over when they're watching television, right? Like incredible sport, incredible story, incredible scandal, and after all of that, it moved the needle a little bit on human performance. And I think. I'm not going to say Oscar Pistorius was a good guy, but that whole story I think was fundamentally good for the advancement of sport and the advancement of human performance. Okay, now it didn't have good outcomes all the way around, right? It had a lot of really bad outcomes. A couple people died, a couple lives got ruined, but.
Well, that's the other argument.
Yeah, I think through the lens of history, you'll see that was a really interesting thing, and the consequence of it is that it moved the needle a little bit, right?
Well, if we think about it in linear progression, which nothing with human beings is ever straight linear.
For sake of argument.
Right, for sake of argument, and then also like seeing what's going to end up happening, so like a trend line anyway. So that was the other thing. I do think that eventually, whatever years down the road, that we will have augmentation and all sorts of stuff. But then you start to think about the negative effects, and I feel like there does, as more and more gets changed and science gets pushed, then there is a more competitive push to do these things and an allowance, right?
Yeah.
If you're already like augmenting limbs, there really is no limit to what you're going to do anyway, right? So then all bets are off. So if we're doing that with sport, we're doing that with everything.
Yeah.
And then one could argue what many argue all the time is that we will be our own destruction.
Okay, that's one benchmark. Okay, I'm not going to die on that hill. I'm going to say
I'm not either, but I like to bring it up.
I mean, maybe we will. We will certainly be our own destiny, right? Whether that destiny is good or bad, or has a finite end to it, I would agree with that. But I don't see it that way, Dan. I see that it's just going to keep getting wilder and further and weirder than we can even imagine right now. And I've got something I want to say, but I don't want to kill the podcast with one line, so I'm going to kind of save it here and see if our discussion takes us there. But you think about other performance-enhancing drugs like food, okay, right? So that's a great example, right?
Food's a great example.
I mean, nutrition is the rock bottom foundation of athletic performance, right? You can have the best coaches and the best training regime and the best raw talent, but if you're not eating right, you will not be competitive, right? So, I'll put it out there.
To a certain level.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you get it to the highest levels, then yes.
Yeah. Food is a performance-enhancing drug.
It is.
Even for amateurs like myself, right? Like, if I'm eating poorly, I'm performing poorly. Okay, I know that, right? So I have to be very careful about what I eat. How about sleep? I mean, is sleep a drug? I guess you could say yeah, it kind of is.
I guess I see what you're saying, but like those are, until you're talking about genetically modified food as a performance enhancer, then I would say that would count as a performance enhancing drug.
Yeah.
Right? And if you have like something that helps you cheat sleep, that maybe changes some things where it's like, oh, we're going to, like, for example, like if you had some kind of like melatonin injection or something like that, because that would have a negative effect as well, right? You get melatonin just like you do any hormone. The minute that you stop taking melatonin, then your body's not going to produce it correctly, right? Depending on how long that you've done that.
Right.
And then you're at a loss and have all sorts of dropout from that. But it would, I mean, I don't know what actually like chemicals you'd have to all put in. I'm just like saying melatonin. So then you would have like a drug-aided sleep. Does that make sense?
To me, that makes great sense because I love having a good night's sleep, and I am willing.
So do I.
And I am willing to do. I don't know. I wouldn't say questionable things, but I would. If I could take something that would help me get better sleep without having any sort of harmful side effects or long-term downside, I'd probably do that. How about caffeine? I see you're holding something from Starbucks. There might be some caffeine in that product. I don't know.
There is definitely caffeine in this product for sure.
Yeah, and
much needed caffeine too.
And okay, so to me, caffeine is a performance-enhancing drug.
Very much is.
And the downside is I'm hopelessly addicted to it. Right? If I don't get my caffeine every day, I get splitting headaches, and I'm
for sure.
I'm non-functional.
I've thought of going off of it many times because I don't like anything like that.
Yeah.
That I have to be dependent on.
Right.
But God, Alex, I love coffee.
I do.
And it's not just that. It's like I just like the, I like the whole scenario of like you get a hot cup of coffee, you're gonna sit down, you're gonna do work, or you're gonna like enjoy the morning or whatever it is you're gonna do. The smell, the heat, the taste of it, like all of it comes together to be just a great experience.
Yeah, it's like ritual.
Right.
Right. And some people have told me going to Starbucks is like going to church and receiving communion, right? Like you go into a place and it's separate from the world, and it's
or confession. So I usually pull up and then I tell them all my sins, and then sometimes they give me a free cup of coffee if I'm honest enough, which may or may not happen, but it sounds good.
No. But I mean, here I am, like sucking down a Jocko, right? And
who probably will sponsor our podcast at some point,
right? And why am I doing it? Well, because I believe that all these chemicals and minerals and whatever is in this thing is going to somehow help me move the needle just a little bit further.
Right.
And, in my professional life, I wondered, I was so competitive in my professional life, and I wanted to succeed so badly. I thought many times, is there a performance-enhancing drug that I could take that would give me a competitive edge over my colleagues or over people that worked in other companies and somehow advance my career? And
That's why speed and cocaine got really popular in the financial world.
Yeah, right. Okay, so and I thought about that. I thought, wow, is that for me? Should I like take cocaine before my shift starts to help me be better or be more I don't know, dialed in on what I was doing? And I did the math on this one, and it just did the balance was unfavorable. Let's
Unfavorable,
put it to
for
say
sure.
the least, right?
To say the least,
Like,
yes.
Yeah, the cost was prohibitive. The quality of the material was questionable. The deleterious side effects were known and obvious. Like, it was just so downside.
Yeah.
And so I had to find other ways to enhance my game. And I did that through self-improvement, study, sleep, putting in extra time at work, just like finding out, working with mentors and things like that.
But that's the other thing is I think that all makes perfect sense.
Right.
And what you did is a logical, great way to do that with anything, right? You should weigh the costs and like what the benefits are, a little cost benefit analysis, and then go through with it. And then depending which way the needle moves, you should be like, all right, I'm going to do this.
Right.
However, I think a lot of people, the fact that it's such a seemingly simple fix, they don't really look at all the negatives, right? They know the negatives are there, they just don't really go through them at all, and it's easier for them to start using some kind of drug than it is to put in the work, put in the extra time, set your schedule better, study, like do some stuff outside of what you're already doing.
Right.
They're like, I'm just going to take this drug and I'm going to be up for whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. So this brings up a great point, Dan. Okay, since I have already stated on this podcast, I'm willing to die on the hill of performance-enhancing drugs, I think I ought to throw a couple qualifiers in there.
Yes.
The first thing you have to do is you have to bring superior discipline and superior work ethic and a whole bunch of other stuff to the table before a performance-enhancing drug is going to make any difference in you, right? If you don't bring that work ethic and if you don't bring the ambition, the burning ambition, and the willingness just to drive harder than anybody else will go, it isn't going to matter, right? It's not going to help you if you don't bring everything else to the table.
You see in the bodybuilding world all the time because you have a bunch of like regular bodybuilding competitions where they don't test,
right,
and those guys are giants. However, they do, at the top of their game, they do work their asses off to get where they were, right? While they do use a completely unhealthy amount of anabolics and all sorts of stuff, they also put in all the time in the gym, the extra volume and the quicker healing time that they get from some of these performance enhancers, they take advantage of in time, right? So instead of like being able to do like an hour intense workout, they're there 3-4 hours,
right.
Or they break it up into multiple sessions a day, so that they can be at the top of their game. And I'm not saying I agree with it, but they do put that in,
right?
Because that was going to be my next argument with stuff would be like, all right, let's say you can get extra limbs, right? Let's say it's expensive. You can get extra arms, you can get heart, lungs. You can even get some stuff that like helps you with like your brain waves and your vision and stuff like that. Then do we fall into the area where more and more poorer communities get pushed out of sport because they don't have the funds and the resources to get these things? And then is it more about like knowing how to use your genetically modified parts versus actually putting in the work of your sport?
Yeah.
Like see what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, right. Like anything that's going to give you an edge leaves somebody marginalized, right?
That's fair, yeah.
Okay. And marginalizing people or increasing the population of marginalized peoples is fundamentally bad for the human race, okay?
Yeah, because that's how that's how we get set back. Because then if you have a large scale of the population,
Yeah.
and this has happened throughout history in every empire, country, dynasty ever,
Yeah.
is that as people get marginalized and you have like 2% and then 98% are unhappy,
Right.
well, that's 98% that might get so unhappy that they become violent.
Right.
And then now we're in a civil war of sorts.
Yeah.
And that always sets us back.
Right.
Right. And then we have to rebuild and like start a new society, or whatever.
Right.
So
Yeah, I mean, there's also, I'm not sure I want to go into like social justice and stuff like that.
performance enhancing
Yet.
drugs equals civil war.
Wow. Okay. As a counterpoint to my argument, okay. First of all, are you willing to die on that hill?
No. I mean, I don't know. I think though. No, I'm not willing to die on any of these hills that I'm bringing up, because this is like the first time I've really thought about all this, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So I'm still formulating my opinion.
Okay, well, let me give you some more things to think about, Dan.
I always
Okay,
like more things to think
about. So, I said it's fundamentally good for sport and the human race. So let's talk about the human race for a minute.
Okay.
So, this may seem a little off topic, but I submit that we are a space-faring species. Okay, we are destined to travel the cosmos, right? And we're just now getting into that, right?
It makes sense.
But what happens? What happens if you're up in space for a really long time?
We're an expansionist race.
Yes, we are. Oh man, are we ever? Right?
For sure.
It's like some of the best and the worst of what makes us human.
Yeah,
our
there's
tendency
positives
to
and negatives
expand,
for sure. Yeah.
But if you're in space for a really long time, you're gonna be subjected to some stuff that is not good for you, right?
Yeah, true.
Microgravity erodes bone tissue, and
Because you can't load it.
You can't load it, right? And you can't load the bone. You can't get the muscles moving. The muscles atrophy. Okay?
Yeah, because that's a whole big thing in space is actually space exercise.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Send Mad Lab up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we could probably do a whole podcast on that. Right?
Zero gravity strength training.
I love it.
I have no idea how we would do that.
Okay, just to take a little tangent and reel me back in, but I was imagining like, oh well, you can't lift weights in zero gravity because weight is not a function, but what you can do is resistance, right?
Yeah.
So what if you put like a Concept 2 rower on the ISS? And then I got to thinking, yeah, but it's got a big flywheel in there, and flywheels generate angular momentum, and if you get enough of it, it starts tilting the whole spacecraft like a giant gyroscope.
I actually didn't even think about that.
I know. This is the stuff that keeps me awake at night, right? Like
It's because of that game you're playing.
Yeah. High Frontier, everyone. That's
High
the name
Frontier.
Of the game. Yeah.
Maybe they'll sponsor us.
But you go up in space long enough, and your body is going to start falling apart, right? The bone loss, the muscle atrophy. The effect of the cumulative effect of radiation in space, right? Like, it's
I never
bad
even
news.
thought about that.
Yeah, it's really bad news. And so, if we are to spend more time in space, let's say we're going to go to Mars, for example. Right?
Yeah.
So Mars has no atmosphere. You're going to get bombarded by cosmic rays.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. How do we build rad-hardened humans for extended space travel? I don't know the answer, but I think it lies somewhere in that whole concept of like performance-enhancing drugs, augmentation, right? Elective or non-elective.
And we would have to do that no matter where we expand to. Because even on our own planet, if we decide to expand into the great frontier of the sea,
right,
we would also have to do that because of pressurization and oxygen and all sorts of stuff like that.
I mean, think of the long-range mixed gas divers that work on the oil rigs.
Yeah.
Right? Those guys are down 1,000 feet below the surface for weeks at a time because they live in the little chamber, right?
What do you think, to another tangent?
Yeah.
What in your head, like what personality traits besides like being like a large introvert of some sort?
Yeah.
Or like what makes you decide that is the way that you're going to live your life?
Money.
I guess. I don't think any.
I don't know.
I think even Ryan's back there going like this.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any amount that you could pay me to go down for. Well, that's not true. I don't know, man. If I had to spend like almost a year down there, like that changes you.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of the time you're not doing anything, right? You're
Yeah.
in a tiny little pressure chamber with a bunch of other guys.
I'd go insane.
I would too, right? Unless you were taking some performance-enhancing drug that maybe helped you not care. I don't know. Right?
I guess that is
Right.
That's a good point.
I don't know. Like in World War II,
Yeah.
the soldiers got doped up with amphetamines, right, to make them fight harder,
Yeah.
and to keep them in combat longer, right? I mean, yeah, you give people drugs so that they don't care anymore, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm not advocating it. I'm just
Right.
saying the examples of using
That's why is that why they
performance-enhancing
tested?
drugs are. I mean, they've been with us for centuries.
Because at the same time, they were like testing LSD and stuff on people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not sure that had any positive outcomes, right? Like war is not a positive outcome, right? By any yardstick. Don't
I
go
was going to
there.
ask
Just-
that
just,
too.
Just take it. Take
Yeah.
my word on this.
I
one.
would agree. I would agree with that. I would.
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder if like some of the infighting is good for the expansionist nature of the human race to keep us sharp.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if there are other organisms out there that are competitive, then we would need to be at the top of our
Okay.
game to meet them instead of being like a super peaceful.
I mean, if we could consider moral alternatives to war, like sport, yeah, there. Okay, so here we are. We're coming back full circle again. If we can get better at sport, we might also be getting better at war for when we need it.
But a lot of times if it was something like that, war might be there right now.
Yeah, it
you know
might
what I'm
be.
saying? Like it's all of a sudden, now we meet this other thing. Now things are happening. Time for war. So that would be troublesome because then you'd have no preparation.
Yeah.
Right now we do have preparation because we've been fighting each other, which again, I'm not a warmonger in any way.
I know.
Like,
Put the disclaimer on there real quick.
Yeah,
this
'cause I don't-
podcast is not about war. This podcast is about
Winning.
Winning. Right? Okay. Wait a minute.
Wait.
Okay, so anyway, back to my thread then, right? We're up in space. We're up there for a really long time. We're being subjected to radiation effects, even if it's just something short term, like a 2-year mission to Mars, right?
Okay.
9 months out, a month there, 9 months back, something like that, right? You're gonna have a lot of problems, long range problems with your humans, right? And that's the shortest.
Do we have any studies? Because
Yeah,
you
go
know more
ahead.
about this, so I'm asking you. Do we have? Has anybody looked at this? Because I've never looked at this. Of people going up into space for a long period of time and coming back, and the issues that they have.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is one of the ongoing missions of the International Space Station.
That
is to
makes
study
sense.
the effect of the long-term effect of space on humans.
I'd
right?
imagine they do tons of studies on it.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that the radiation hazard is a problem. We know the environment is lethal. Okay.
Yeah.
We know that the microgravity causes other problems, right? But rather than like the longest time anybody's spent in space is it's not quite 2 years, I think.
Okay.
Right? Cumulative. But
that would give us a good snapshot, right?
It's a snapshot. It's a starting point. But let's consider what happens if suddenly we decide we want to take people out to Jupiter or the moons of Saturn or something like that, right? Okay, now we're talking like 7-8 year mission.
Yeah.
Okay? That's a tough one.
But
right?
is it 7-8 year mission because of the distance?
Yes.
But that could also change with technology, correct?
Yeah, it could.
Because you could get into teleportation and stuff, and there is good research out there that we could do that.
Yeah.
Because we've teleported particles, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know enough about quantum physics to talk intelligently.
That's a whole interesting.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode. Okay?
Yeah. You're not kidding.
I have to do some background research on that one.
Yeah, I listened to a little bit of a podcast on quantum physics one time, and I was like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah. Right. But okay. So back to the here and now, though. The stuff that is known and real and applicable with current science is that there are ways to enhance performance.
For sure.
When neglecting the individual and looking at society, enhancing performance is generally speaking a good thing if for no other reason than it tells us what is not working and what is working, right? Like, we used to think it was okay to smoke, right? Smoking cigarettes. Hell, my mother was not prescribed, but was advised by her doctor when she was pregnant with me. If you're stressed out, you should have a cigarette. Okay? Right? So, I mean, even within my lifetime, we've seen like everybody smoking to basically nobody smoking, right?
Yeah, I guess that does make sense.
Yeah, we're moving the needle. We're learning about this stuff. We're studying the long-term effects of these drugs, right? That's a really good thing. So again, I'm saying that, even if the outcome is negative, the real outcome is positive because we learned something important, right? Like have you ever
agree
heard
with that. I think that is a great point.
Yeah.
But then when you say it's good for the human race to do these things, then wouldn't it, just like anything else that you would be like, oh, it's good if you do this so that you can do this. But that's the other important part, so that you can. So then you would have to make definitive statements, you'd have to be like, why are we here? And like, what's the purpose of the human race?
Oh, man.
I know.
So how many episodes have we just generated from this one discussion? So I think we've got like 5 or 6 stuff. I keep saying, oh, we're going to have to take that up on another episode. So Dan, we got a ton of material here for like future podcast episodes, right?
For sure.
But you said something really interesting a few minutes ago. You said like, what's our purpose, right?
What's our purpose?
I'll answer that question. I don't know, okay, but it causes me to ask another question, right? If you were to compare us today in our modern form with the guys that I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast 150 years ago, when sport was just starting to emerge as a profession, right? What would they think of us now? Would they think of us as being very much like them or very much unlike them? I wonder.
I think, at first glance, they would be like very much unlike them.
Yeah.
But you would have some of your scholars and stuff start to dig in and find a lot of similarities.
We all still wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
We have to eat. We have to sleep.
We haven't evolved much from
our biology is basically
our
the
biology
same.
or our personalities.
Yeah. But our society is certainly different. Right?
Very different, yes.
And so, I just wonder, like, will we get to a point somewhere in the future when the enhancements, chemical, physical, mechanical, the enhancements have become so profound, we start asking ourselves, or we start looking at something or someone that might consider themselves to be human, but we would look at and say, not even close. Right? Okay. So, for example, we joke around about Ronnie Coleman a lot, right?
Yeah.
Okay, right? And you'll look at Ronnie Coleman in his heyday and say, we'd say jokingly, that dude's not even human. He's a total mutant, right? Okay. But we say that because that's our frame of reference, right? Of course, Ronnie Coleman is just a normal human being. He's just like us, right?
Right.
He worked harder. He had better genes. He took the right drugs. I don't know. He did all the right things to become.
All weight was lightweight.
Right. But even in that context, we look at a guy like Ronnie Coleman and say mutant, right? We look at a guy like Jocko Willink and say total mutant, right? He's not like us. He's something different, right? And I think that the point where we look at something and say that's no longer human is not that far away. Okay? All right?
Well, to your point, if you looked at somebody in like the 14 or 1500s and you were like, hey, take a look at this guy, and you showed them Ronnie Coleman in their heyday, they'd be like, what is going on?
Yeah, and that's a human, by the way. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Renaissance man, that's a human.
Right.
Right. And so I think it's like I don't know what the goal of humanity is. I don't know what our purpose on being here is. But I sometimes find myself wondering, just what exactly are we? Like, what is it about us that makes us human? Right.
Well, so that would be the first start, right? Just like you would do anything, like if somebody was in high school and they're like, you're trying to figure out and help them with whatever they're going to do with their life, right? So where they're going to go to college, if they're going to go to college, like what they're going to study, what field they're going to go into or whatever, you would find out what they like to do, what their positive traits are, what their negative traits are, and you would kind of go off that. And I think if we're thinking about the purpose of humanity, that's what we should think of.
Okay.
What do we always gear towards as humans? What is like years and years and years of civilization have told us? Like we're obviously expansionists, so we should expand.
Okay.
Right.
So that's a human characteristic. Expansion.
Yeah, very human.
Yeah.
We're always expanding.
Right. But like getting up and going to work every day is not necessarily a human thing, right? I don't think that makes us human, right?
No, I agree.
Okay.
But many people are unhappy with getting up and going to work every day
no
because
kidding.
they're probably not doing what they're supposed to do as a human.
More drugs, right?
more drugs.
But okay, Dan, you have a nice head of hair. I don't. Okay. That's different, but it's still human, right?
Right.
Okay. Oscar Pistorius has no legs.
Okay.
He's got blades that help him run. Okay. But we would look at Oscar and say, yeah, he's still human. He's just a human that doesn't have legs anymore.
For sure.
Okay. At what point would you? Okay, I don't know.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
at what point do you?
So you watch sci-fi and stuff, right? You're familiar with the Star Trek series and everything, right? Next Generation, the Borg.
Okay.
Okay. Human?
But that's what
used to be, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, is there a Borg? That's just like a human, like a cyborg, like a human with augmented parts.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that what a cyborg is?
Yeah, it is.
In any kind of mythos, or not mythos, but like any kind of theater.
I wonder, like, at what point do you start saying that's no longer human?
And then we're probably going to start to define that. Right, and there's probably going to be a whole huge thing, just like with anything else, just like with when people have the abortion argument, which I won't get into in any way right now. But like, what constitutes human life? With the start of human life. Yeah. So then I think we're going to have that same thing, and we're going to probably have two sides where people are like, no, a human stops being a human when they have more than one augmented limb. And like somebody else will be like, no, it's only when they have change of brain function and heart and lung stuff, right? Like so there is probably going to be a hole in that we're going to be fighting over that in the future.
So I love to read, right?
Yes.
And I always have like 3 or 4 books going at once, right?
Right.
So recently I read a book, big surprise, right? It was called Axiom's End, okay? And the premise of the story is that
Axiom's End, like E-N-D?
Yeah.
Okay.
Axiom's End. And the premise of this story is that an intelligent race of what we would call aliens arrives on Earth and asks for political asylum. And the controversy in the book it goes around the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and people are saying we can't give them human rights because they're not human. But we can exploit the hell out of them. Right, and that was the big conflict in the book. It's like, what is human, what is not, what has rights, what doesn't have rights.
And that would be an actual argument if that did happen. Like, that's very realistic.
I think it's an argument now, right? Like last episode we talked about labels, right? And the genesis of that idea in my mind started with the term MAGA Republicans, right?
Okay.
I'm like, oh, that's a really convenient thing to say. I'm going to slap a label on somebody, and therefore I don't have to like them anymore. I don't even have to consider them to be humans anymore, right? I don't have to extend rights or courtesies or anything to them because I've labeled them, right? The Ukraine war. The Ukraine soldiers call the Russians orcs. A very convenient title for somebody you're trying to dehumanize.
Right.
Okay. And once you dehumanize somebody, you don't have to care anymore. You've basically like abdicated any sort of responsibility for doing the things that we consider to be human, like respect, care,
not killing
nurture, not killing.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's I don't know. That's a topic maybe for another podcast, Dan.
Probably, because there's a lot that goes into that too.
Yeah. So we've been going, I don't know, 45 minutes or so here, and we've generated. We've stormed a couple hills that we're willing to die on, or maybe not die on.
Right.
We've given some endorsements. We've talked about. We've loaded up our podcast schedule for the next 6 months, I think, on different topics.
Sure.
We started with performance-enhancing drugs are good for society and good for sport too. What is human? Okay, crazy stuff.
We've probably started an intergalactic war.
God, I hope
probably, because we're going to expand to wherever.
Oh yeah, and they're listening, right?
Of course,
the eye in the sky.
So be ready.
Yeah, the eye in the sky is listening to us right now. You know, they're already the Armada is on its way. We're going to because
Sorry,
of this
guys.
podcast. Sorry, everyone. You know, didn't mean to. Anyway, yeah, wow, what a great episode.
It was a great episode.
I'm honestly, Dan, I'm about talked out at this point.
I think I am as well, believe it or not. What time is it, Alex?
Dan, you know what? It's time to win.
It's time to win. Alex, you're the man.
Dan, I'm not a man. I'm just a human.